They fired me like I was nothing. No thank you, no explanation, just a cold walk to the elevator with security at my side. I handed over my badge without a word, no protest, no anger. I just smiled, because what they didn't know was that I owned the company they thought they were kicking me out of. I watched from behind my glasses as my sister, Carrie Bennett, my manager, Greg Lawson, and my former best friend, Debbie Klein, stood together, smirking proud of what they thought was a clean betrayal. They believed they'd erased me, the quiet IT guy, who kept their systems running and their problems invisible. But I was never just the guy in the server room. For years, I built something they never saw coming, a truth I'd kept hidden behind every reboot, every software update, every fake smile at a conference table. They thought they were writing the ending to my story. What they didn't realize was that they were walking straight into the middle of mine. I didn't need to fight them that day. I just needed to wait a little longer, because everything they took from me, I'd already taken from them, and 2 days later, I was going to prove it. 6 months before they fired me, I was just Walt Carter, the guy everyone called when the printer jammed or the projector froze 10 minutes before a board meeting. My office was a converted storage closet with no windows and a desk that rocked if you leaned on it wrong. Nobody ever noticed me unless something went wrong. And I liked it that way. I worked quietly, kept my head down, and solved problems before anyone else even knew they existed. I didn't care about credit. I cared about systems running right, clients, staying secure, and having the freedom to build something bigger outside those walls. Carrie came in fresh from grad school, starry-eyed, full of ambition, and I helped her every step of the way. I pulled strings to get her interviewed. I prepped her for every question, even stayed late after my shift to coach her through her first few weeks. She was family. Of course I vouched for her. But everything changed when she started dating the COO's nephew. Suddenly, doors that had been locked for years flew open for her. She was pulled into meetings I wasn't invited to, given authority over projects I had led from day one. Then came the emails I was mysteriously left off of. Then came the access being revoked, first one system, then another. I asked Greg what was going on. He shrugged, told me it was just internal restructuring. But I knew. The writing was on the wall. Still, I never expected Carrie to be the one who filed the complaint that finally got me fired. It was a doctored report, a falsified security breach claiming I'd leaked confidential client data. HR didn't investigate. Greg didn't question it. Debbie didn't defend me. Just a quick, cold meeting where Greg said, "Walt, you understand it's best for everyone if we make this clean." I remember the way Carrie looked at me that day, standing behind Greg like she belonged there. She didn't even blink. Not once. That kind of betrayal doesn't just break something inside you. It sets something in motion. But they had no idea what they'd just done. For 7 years in silence, I'd been building something far bigger than they could imagine. My company, Ironwood Technologies, was small at first, but through strategic mergers and private acquisitions, it grew strong, quiet, invisible. Every month, I bought shares of their firm through a shell company piece by piece until I held a majority. The last transaction closed just 8 days before they pushed me out. I walked out of that building with nothing in my hands but everything in my name. And as they toasted to my exit with champagne and fake smiles, I was already preparing for my return. Because I wasn't just coming back to reclaim a job. I was coming to take over the whole damn table. And 2 days later, at their little celebration, the real story would begin. 2 days after they fired me, the office was buzzing with fake excitement. Balloons floated near the conference room doors. A cake with "To New Beginnings" written in buttercream sat on the side table, and the smell of cheap champagne hung in the air. Carrie wore an emerald green dress that looked like it cost more than my monthly mortgage back when I still had one. Greg stood by the window with a glass in hand, trying too hard to look important. Debbie laughed loud enough for the boardroom to hear her. They were celebrating my absence like it was a promotion. In a way, it was, but not for them. While they toasted and posted filtered selfies about fresh leadership and turning the page, I was finalizing a mandatory board meeting under my legal name. It was set for 7:00 p.m. Sharp subject line, emergency ownership review. Attendance required. No explanation, no warning, just a quiet move like I'd always played. At exactly 6:58, I stepped into the boardroom. No fanfare, no name badge, just a charcoal suit and a folder full of truth. When I walked in, Carrie's smile froze mid-sentence. Debbie blinked like she was seeing a ghost. Greg cleared his throat and took a step back. The CEO, Thomas Blake, who also happened to be Debbie's uncle, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. "Walt, what the hell are you doing here?" he asked, half standing. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just walked to the head of the table, the seat Greg had claimed that morning, and placed the folder in front of the company's legal counsel. "These are ownership documents," I said calmly. "I suggest you read them out loud." The room shifted. The attorney flipped open the folder, eyes scanning line by line. Silence stretched like an iron cable. Then his face turned pale. "According to these filings," he said slowly, "a holding company named Ironwood Technologies now owns 72% of our firm's voting shares." He looked up at me. "And it lists Walter Carter as sole owner." Carrie choked on her champagne. Debbie set her glass down with trembling fingers. Thomas's face flushed a deep red. "You manipulated this company behind our backs," he growled. I looked him dead in the eye. "I didn't manipulate anything. I followed the rules you wrote. You just never expected the guy fixing your laptops to read them. That room so full of noise just minutes before went dead quiet. No one moved. No one blinked. I leaned back in the chair that now legally belonged to me. This was no longer their company. It was mine, but I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot, because I hadn't just come to take ownership, I'd come to clean house, and the first sweep would start with a folder I hadn't opened yet. Not until now. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a second folder, thicker, heavier. The kind of folder that didn't whisper, but roared when opened. I slid it across the table, slow and steady, until it landed in front of the attorney with a soft thud. "What's this?" Thomas asked, eyes flicking toward it like it might bite. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The attorney opened it, and the first page alone was enough to drain the color from his face. Inside were internal emails, flagged financial records, backdated signatures, and a falsified report, the same one Carrie used to get me fired. At the top of every document was her name. She lunged forward, snatching the folder, flipping through the pages in panic. "This is revenge," she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "You're doing this because I climbed faster than you." I met her eyes without flinching. "No, I'm doing this because you lied, because you sold out your own brother for a shortcut, and because this company deserves better than backroom games and forged reports." Greg shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Debbie stared at the table, suddenly quiet. For a long time, nobody spoke. Then Debbie looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Walt, we've known each other since high school." She sounded like she was reaching for a lifeline already slipping from her fingers. "This doesn't have to go this far." I turned to her slowly. "You threw me under the bus for a promotion. You stood there and watched them frame me. You think I forgot?" She looked away, ashamed, or maybe just cornered. Carrie, still flipping through the pages, stopped suddenly. "You're bluffing," she snapped. "None of this will hold up. You're just trying to humiliate me." The board attorney cleared his throat. "These documents are authenticated. All metadata lines up. timestamp source logs, and employee access trails. There's no bluff here. Thomas stood up. This is a disgrace, he barked. You're not God, Walt. You can't just walk in here and erase people's careers. I stood up too calmly, adjusting my coat. You erased mine the moment you let HR walk me out without a question. I'm just returning the favor, only I'm doing it by the book. I walked over to my briefcase one more time and pulled out 3 sealed envelopes. No names on the outside, just wait. I handed them out first to Carrie, then to Greg, then Debbie. Your severance packages, I said. Consider this your last official act in this company. Carrie's hands shook. Greg looked like he'd swallowed his own tongue. Debbie wouldn't meet my eyes. I turned toward the door, every step measured, every breath steady. I could feel their eyes burning holes in my back, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to, because they were no longer in control, and they knew it. What none of us knew, though not yet, was that getting them out was only the beginning. The real danger hadn't even arrived. Not yet. For a moment after I left that boardroom, I let myself believe it was over. The justice I had waited years for had finally landed, precise and undeniable. Carrie, Greg, and Debbie were out. The company was mine, not just on paper, but in truth. I'd cleaned house, restored integrity, and walked away with my head high. But peace, it turns out, is fragile when it's built on top of betrayal. The calls started 3 days later. No voice on the other end, just silence. Long, deliberate silence, like someone wanted me to know they were there. Then came the emails. No sender name, no reply address, just threats. Vague at first, then specific. Claims of fraud, accusations that my ownership was illegitimate, even fake legal filings in random jurisdictions. I brushed them off, at first desperate noise from bitter people with nothing left to lose. But that changed the night someone broke into my condo. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was touched except my laptop, my encrypted laptop. When I came home, it was open. Files I hadn't accessed in weeks were sitting on the screen. The message was clear. I checked building security. Access logs showed someone had entered using one of the company's old internal badges, ones I'd personally deactivated after the firings. Only 2 people could have had backdoor clearance to override those logs, Carrie and Debbie. That's when it hit me they weren't just angry, they were unraveling, and desperate people don't think straight. In the days that followed, I discovered that Carrie had tried launching a startup using parts of our proprietary code data she'd stolen before being fired. But word spread quickly. Investors backed out. She was blacklisted not just locally, but nationally. Debbie didn't fare any better. She applied for a senior role at a competing firm. They knew who she was the minute she walked through the door. No offer, no second chances. I hadn't leaked anything about them. I didn't have to. They burned their own bridges on the way down, but they thought I had. That I was behind every missed opportunity, every closed door, and that belief lit something dangerous in them. I saw it coming at the company's annual shareholder meeting, my first as majority owner. The ballroom was packed. Projectors beamed record profits on the screen. News crews from 3 states were there. My speech was prepared. My team briefed. But as I stepped up to the podium, a voice cut through the room like glass. Walt Carter is a fraud. It was Carrie. Marching down the center aisle like she owned the floor, a thick folder clutched in her hand. Reporters turned cameras followed. She held up the folder like a torch. This, she shouted, proves that Ironwood Technologies was built on stolen software and fake shell companies. He doesn't own this company legally. The room gasped. My hands tightened on the podium. This wasn't over. Not yet. I didn't flinch. As Carrie stood in the center of the ballroom, waving her folder like it held the truth of the universe, I kept my hands steady on the podium. Inside, my heart hammered against my ribs, but my face was stone. I'd been waiting for this. In fact, I had counted on it. The moderator turned to me, his voice tight. "Mr. Carter, do you have a response?" I stepped away from the microphone for a moment and reached into my jacket. The silence in the room felt thick enough to choke on. Carrie's eyes narrowed, expecting panic. Instead, I pulled out a folder of my own, sleek, black, and heavy with proof. Actually, I said, walking slowly towards center stage, I was hoping Carrie would show up today, because I brought something too. I opened the folder and held up a small flash drive for the room to see. Then I signaled to the AV team. On my cue, a clip began to play over the ballroom speaker system. It was a recording, clear, sharp, undeniable. Carrie's voice echoed through the speakers. "If we leak this, it'll destroy him. Doesn't matter if it's real. By the time he proves it's fake, the damage will be done." The room erupted in gasps. Some reporters stood. Cameras clicked like a thunderstorm. The board members exchanged wide-eyed glances. Carrie's face went pale. You bugged me," she sputtered. "You set me up." "No," I replied, voice calm, but unyielding. I protected myself. I placed a dummy file in our internal archives weeks ago, labeled Ownership Vulnerability Confidential. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist. Her hands clenched the folder she'd brought. She opened it, flipping through pages of documents that were suddenly meaningless. "You fabricated this," she shouted, desperate now. But the damage was already done. I turned to the crowd. This company was nearly destroyed by people who cared more about power than truth. That ends today. Security moved toward her, slow and deliberate. She didn't resist. Not anymore. Her fight had already collapsed under the weight of her own ambition. As she was escorted out of the ballroom, the applause started, not loud at first, but steady. It wasn't for revenge. It was for survival, for clarity, for truth. I returned to the podium, looked out at the shareholders, and said the words I had carried for years. Ironwood was built in silence, but it will move forward with integrity, starting now. I thought that moment would be my ending, my full circle victory, but I was wrong. The next morning, I found a gold-embossed envelope sitting on my desk. No return address, just one handwritten note inside. "We know who really funded Ironwood Technologies. You're not the only ghost in this story. Let's meet. D." My blood ran cold. There was only one person who ever signed with just D. Daniel Hart, my former business partner, the man I thought was dead. I stared at the note for what felt like an hour. Just 5 lines handwritten in the same sharp script I hadn't seen in over 15 years. "We know who really funded Ironwood Technologies." The weight of that sentence hit harder than any accusation Carrie had ever thrown, because it wasn't just a threat, it was a challenge. A ghost had come back from the dead, and he was calling me out by name. Daniel Hart, my former partner, my closest friend once, the man I buried in memory the night his car went off a bridge in Nashville during a thunderstorm. I'd mourned him. Hell, I'd carried guilt for years, thinking our falling out might have driven him off the edge. But what if he never died? What if he disappeared on purpose? Back then, Daniel and I were just 2 broke kids coding after our retail shifts, dreaming of something bigger. But Daniel always wanted shortcuts, fast exits, high risks. He tried selling our first prototype to a foreign buyer, flagged by half the federal government. I walked away. He didn't. That was the last time I saw him. Until now. The note included a time and location, midnight, an abandoned warehouse outside Louisville. No threats, no demands, just let's meet. I could have ignored it, should have. But something in me couldn't let it go. I needed to know if it was real, if he was real. At 11:58, I pulled into the gravel lot. Fog clung low to the ground. The building looked like it hadn't seen light in a decade. I stepped inside, heart steady but alert. And there he was leaning against a rusted pillar in a black leather jacket. Same smirk I remembered like not a single year had passed. "Long time, Walt," he said, stepping out of the shadows. "I thought you were dead," I replied, my voice sharper than I meant. He laughed once, almost. "But watching you take Ironwood solo, that gave me a reason to come back." He tossed a flash drive at my feet. "You recognize that I picked it up slowly. What is this proof," he said, "that your holding company, the one that owns everything I seed funded, that through an account I opened, which means legally I own 49%. My stomach nodded. "That's not possible. You signed everything over. You disappeared." "I forged the signature," he said flatly. "And now I want in half the profits, half the power." He stepped closer. "Or I go public. The board, the press, your investors. I'll burn it all down." His words hit like a slap, but I didn't show it. I looked him dead in the eye and smiled. "You didn't come back for power," I said. "You came back because you're broke." His smirk twitched. Just a crack. And in that moment, I knew something he didn't. Because Daniel Hart wasn't the only one preparing for this meeting. I had a folder too. And I'd been holding it for just the right time. I didn't break eye contact with Daniel as I reached into my coat and pulled out a folder of my own. Slim, precise, and already burning with purpose. I held it out to him without a word. He didn't take it right away, just stared like he wasn't sure if I was bluffing or baiting him. "What's this?" he asked, his voice lower now, tighter. "It's what you didn't count on," I said. "I knew you were alive, Daniel. I've known for months." That shook him. His jaw twitched, but he tried to play it cool. "You're lying. I tracked the offshore account you used to fund that so-called seed money," I said. "The one you think ties you to Ironwood. I bought it 6 months ago. Every asset in it, every transaction. It's mine now. You don't exist on paper anymore, not in any court that matters." He stepped forward, his bravado cracking. "You set me up." "No," I replied, calm and steady. "I finished the story you tried to rewrite." That was the part that stung. I could see it in his eyes, the slow realization that I wasn't the same kid he left behind all those years ago. I had become everything he thought he would be. And now I was standing over the ashes of the path he abandoned. From the shadows, a side door creaked open. My private legal team stepped in, silent but firm. Daniel backed up a step, his fists clenched. He looked at them, then at me. But the fire was gone. No more threats, no more leverage, just the weight of consequences finally catching up. "You think this is justice," he said bitterly. "This is control, Walt. You've become what we hated." Maybe I admitted, but at least I built something worth protecting. My attorneys approached, hands ready but respectful. "You can walk out, Daniel, or we can make it official right here." He stood frozen, then gave a single nod. No fight left, no comeback, just a long, quiet walk out of the warehouse. As the door shut behind him, the silence that followed was thick, not relief, not triumph, just stillness. I stood there for a moment, letting the air settle. My past had finally caught up to me, and this time I hadn't run. I had stood my ground. But as I looked down at the now empty folder in my hand, something in me shifted. It wasn't victory I felt. It was exhaustion. All those years of building, defending, planning, it had all led to this moment. And yet I wasn't sure what came next. The ghosts were gone, but so was the fire that kept me moving. I had no family left, no friends from the old days, just me, a company, and a silence I hadn't earned yet. That was the part I didn't expect. Peace, it turned out, was a heavy thing to carry when you were used to war. The next morning, I walked into my office alone. No champagne, no applause, just the quiet hum of a company, finally breathing clean air. I pulled out a picture frame from my drawer, one I'd left empty for years. Inside, I placed a simple white sheet. It read, "They fired me, but I owned everything they worked for." Below it, I added one more line, and when the ghosts came back, I buried them too. I sat down and stared out the window as the city woke up, not with the fire of revenge, but with a peace I'd never known. Betrayal changes a man. Loyalty shapes him, but rising again after both, that's where character is born. I thought victory would feel loud, but it didn't. It felt quiet, still honest. Because healing doesn't roar, it whispers. If life has taught me anything, it's this: don't rush to fight battles that time will win for you. Build in silence. Keep your dignity. And when your moment comes, let your truth speak louder than any revenge ever could. If you've ever been counted out or betrayed by those closest to you, drop a comment and share your story. Subscribe to this channel. We're building a place for quiet storms just like you.